We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title also makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is Logan's favorite character and a regular topic of discussion on Single Bound. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring great insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner, including Arrow, Star Wars, and more. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me in an open letter to DC Comics to share our Superman Collected Edition wish lists is returning guest Josh Marowitz. Welcome back.
It's so good to be back.
This is a perfect episode for you, and I say that as I see your beautiful bookshelves behind you with all of your omnis and other hardcovers, so you're the man for this episode.
I'm sure other people have as many things as I do. They just may not happen to be sitting in front of them. But I'm grateful that I set myself up this way so that you would think I'm the perfect person for this episode.
Yeah, it's just based on conversations and social media exchanges we've had in the past. I felt like you would be a great fit for this. This is an episode I've been kicking around for a little while, and with recent announcements about forthcoming collected editions, particularly in the realm of Superman, I just felt like this would be a good time. And when we're talking about collected editions, right, we're talking about trade paperback and hardcover reprints of single issues from a variety of lines and formats. And one of the things that I'll say at the top here as sort of a guardrail, really more for myself than for you, because I don't think you need this, but for me, my intention with this episode is not for this to just be a gripe session. Inevitably, we will share the frustrations we have felt as fans, as people who buy these collected editions when it comes to abandoned lines or gaps in collected material or unpredictable release schedules. We will hit on that. But like I said, my intention is not for this to just be a gripe session. I don't think that gets us very far. I don't think that would be productive. And look, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that someone from DC might hear this. So to whatever extent we can be productive, maybe we can manifest something. I don't know. And I do want to say at the top, and I'll say more of this as we go on, there have been some recent trends and developments in the realm of DC collected editions that have been very encouraging. There are a few things that they're doing, certain lines and formats they're pursuing that I think are fantastic. And my main note is just more. And I guess that's the last thing I'll say by way of setup, which is, I think at the end of the day, what's going to come forth from you and me in this discussion and from the audience members we solicited feedback from is, DC, we just want to give you money for stuff. Like we want to buy these books, right? We just want things to be available. I think that's kind of the heart of a lot of this, right?
Absolutely. I'm, what do you call it? Am I a double dipper? Or I guess, are they double dipping me? Like, I'm the fool who's buying the single issues, and then I'm buying the trade paperbacks, and then I'm buying the hardcovers, because I believe in voting with my dollars for things that I want to see more of. And I know that if I wait for for the whole line to be out there, the whole line's never coming. So I'm buying. I've got money that, well, I don't have money. I'm a stay-at-home dad, but I'm spending money I don't have, willing to spend it at DC for these books. So let's try to help them out best we can and steer them in such a way that we can give them more of the money that I don't have.
You do vote with your wallet, and I admire that. And when you were here, when we talked about the beginning part of the Loeb Kelly era of the super titles, and inevitably in that episode and in most of the episodes during that run, we kept coming up against this idea that there have been gaps, and thankfully some of those are being filled in, which we can get to. But that's a period of Superman comics in particular where I think we've always been left a little wanting more. And you spoke a lot about how you'll be buying that forthcoming City of Tomorrow compendium. You want to vote with your wallet. You want to show DC that there's interest in this. And it hasn't been that long since we did that episode. But I will tell you, even in just those couple of months or whatever, I've had your words ringing in my ears in numerous instances where there's certain things where maybe I own it in a different format or something like that. And similarly, I'm not made of money. I can't buy everything. But there are times where I say to myself, no, to whatever extent this can move the needle, even if it's just incremental, right, to kind of show that. Because when we talk about these abandoned lines, there are a number of things. I think about Superboy Book 1, Trouble in Paradise, the first collection of the Kiesel Grummett series. I think about the Supergirl series by the late, great, recently departed Peter David that was starting to be collected. I think they did, I want to say 4 books. And I didn't buy that. I didn't buy that Superboy one. So in a sense, though, I was part of the problem. So to whatever extent I cannot be part of that problem moving forward, I'm going to try. So your point is well taken, and I do think of you when I'm making those decisions.
Well, I appreciate being thought of. It's incumbent upon us to vote with our wallets.
Right, to the extent that we can, and everybody's in a different situation. But yeah, there is something to be said. And look, and certain audience members who followed my other comic shop related projects, the idea of don't be a flat squirrel is something that will resonate and sound very familiar. But it's true here too. It's like, if you drag your feet, you figure, oh, maybe I'll get it down the line. There's no guarantee you're necessarily going to get that subsequent volume. Now,
right, you got to pre-order.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll get to all this business about the DC trends and practices that maybe we have bumped up against over time, things that we're encouraged by. We'll share our wish lists, the top collected editions you and I want. We'll also bring in a bunch of those submissions from our audience members. But I thought one of the things that would be fun at the top is just to speak a little bit about our own individual collecting habits, which I know can be kind of a big question, but I suppose specifically within the realm of collected editions, what are your habits generally? And to narrow it a little bit, I mean, what are the formats or lines that you tend to really gravitate toward and or stay away from?
Ooh, there's a lot to address in all of that. Gosh, where to start? I guess it starts for me with the single issues, because I feel like if I'm not buying the single issues, they're not going to be collected. Or at least I guess I felt that way a few years ago when we were still at the point that some issues just weren't collected. And now everything gets collected, even even issues from canceled series. So I don't know if I'm holding on to that fear that I have to buy the single issue before I can buy the collected edition. But I think about Metamorpho that just ended at 6. I was buying those single issues because I knew that if I wasn't buying Metamorpho, other people weren't buying Metamorpho, and it turned out that other people still didn't buy Metamorpho, and it was fantastic, and it's gone after 6 issues. But that's getting a collected edition. So I might have to be less scared about that. But in terms of the formats I like the what I call the meaty trade paperbacks. There's the ones that have the 5 or 6 issues in them, and then there's the paperbacks that have 12, maybe even 15 if they're really pushing it, issues in them. Those are the ones I like. They give me, with the way stories work these days, enough bang for my buck that I can read those and maybe get 2 or 3 stories instead of the 6-issue trade paperback that really only amounts to 1 story with a whole lot of nothing in the middle of them. I used to be more enthusiastic about omnibuses, and these days I'm realizing I just don't read them. They're just not comfortable to read. However, especially with the reprints of the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age stuff, I have a lot behind me because for whatever reason, they're not then turning those into paperbacks. And so I've got to have the Silver Age Superman omnibus because they haven't yet come out with the Silver Age Superman paperback. And so until they do, I'm going to keep buying those as omnibuses. I have the DC 1 million omnibus because that's my favorite DC event of all time. I have I'm looking at my shelf over here. I have the Animal Man omnibus by Grant Morrison because, gosh, you give me a 126 issue omnibus, that's the whole Grant Morrison run. Good, I'm set. I can do it in one volume. So I don't know. I tried to balance, like, does this omnibus collect a whole thing, or do I have to buy a series of omnibuses to get the whole thing? And if it's a series, I'm less interested unless I can't get it anywhere else, including on the app. So there are really a lot of considerations that I put into, like, okay, well, what deserves an omnibus and what deserves an absolute edition? That I'm even like more cautious about. I don't want to just buy an absolute edition willy nilly, because I feel like the story has to really earn it for me, and very few stories do, at least for me.
So a lot of what you're saying is resonating with me. I think we're kind of similarly aligned, particularly when it comes to the amount of thought that we put into this. And it's funny because I was reflecting on just my history as a collector, and I've never been diagnosed with OCD. I don't have OCD, but I do, as someone who took one semester of psychology in college, I feel like I at least have some OCD-like tendencies when it comes to collecting, or at least I did. I have gotten vastly more relaxed in recent years. But, stuff like DC changing the trade dress such that the spines no longer line up, like, that still bothers me. But in the past, like, it would really irk me,
Definitely. I have been a collector of these things in the past that when they've changed the trade dress, if for some reason they then re-release the volume 1 in the new trade dress, I've bought those before.
Yeah.
Just so that the spines would match on my shelf.
I hear you. And I guess the other thing is, when I kind of speak to this idea of these OCD-like tendencies, and like I said, I've really backed away from this, thankfully, because sometimes it really drive myself crazy. But in my younger days, with respect to both single issues, which I used to collect and I don't anymore, and with respect to trades, I would do a lot of pruning, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. If there's something you feel like, okay, I'm not going to read this again, I'm going to sell it or donate it or trade it, whatever. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I think when I look back, and these are the pre-podcasting days, like if I were just doing a podcast, I probably wouldn't have thought about it so much, but I feel like I just spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about what deserves a spot on the shelf or not. And the amount of things, especially when I worked at my local comic shop, because then I had this outlet and I would trade stuff out from time to time or whatnot, or those of us who work there, sometimes we would bring in our stuff and put it out for sale, sell it on consignment. So, I kind of had an outlet for some of that. And when I think back, it's like, man, the amount of back and forth with what I was going to keep and whatnot was just, again, I'm glad to not be that fixated on that anymore, because it kind of drove me nuts.
Well, I have to do a lot of that myself, because I have, for my single issues, 25 short boxes. And if it doesn't fit in those 25 short boxes, I don't really have anywhere to put it. I've got a few right now in my in-laws' basement, because they have an enormous basement, and I'd really like to get them out of there, but I'm trying to prune my single issues. And I'm down to 2 big, do you say Kallax, the IKEA shelves, the cubes.
Kallax, like the robot? No, just kidding.
I don't know. Oh, I didn't even think of that. I'm down to 2 of those, and I have to have all my collected editions fit on those and on the 3x3s that I have sitting here behind me. And if it doesn't fit there, again, I have nowhere to put them. So I still do have to find myself pruning. But it bothered me more than when I was listening to another podcast with Dave Mandel and Ryan. Oh gosh, what is his name? They do the stuff that the dreams are made of. It's the movie props podcast. And I don't want anything to do with a movie prop that would take money out of my comic book budget. But the way they talk about collecting is very similar to how I think about collecting. And Dave had this great analogy. He said that some people have the gardens that they go and they putter around in. And when he goes into his prop room, actually he has a prop condo full of movie props. That's his version of puttering around in the garden. And so when I prune and I'm in my ebb phase of comic collecting, that's how I think of it now, and I feel a lot more relaxed about doing it. It used to feel like a chore, and now it feels more like a hobby to go through and prune and make room for stuff that might be coming in, getting rid of stuff that, if I was honest with myself, I would have admitted I was never going to read. Or at least at this phase of my life, with the two young girls I've got, I'm not going to have time to read for a very long time.
No, I hear you. I think the two biggest changes for myself, especially in recent years, one is I've really zeroed in on the Superman books on my bookshelf. And it's not that I'm getting everything, but that's where my focus has been. And that in and of itself is still plenty. There's always stuff coming out, but that has kind of taken a little bit of the pressure off, because now I'm also not concerned with the rest of the DCU. So that has helped me a lot, really just focusing on the Superman side of it. And then you mentioned the omnis. Now, historically, I've never been a fan of the omnibus format for the same reason that you cited, that I think a lot of people are probably nodding along as we're saying it. They are so massive and unwieldy. And it's like, when I read, I like to sit in my recliner in the living room and I hold the book. And to do that with an omnibus, I either need a reading stand, or I need to prop it up on a pillow, or I sit at a desk, or whatever it might be. It's a different experience. However, I think these days what I'm most concerned with, for lack of a better term, or what my main kind of objective is access to as much of this material as possible. And I've come to see the omnis as an effective way to gather up a significant amount of this material. And you're turning and you're looking at your golden age omnis, and you mentioned them before. And I similarly have all of the Superman and the golden age omnis. I have the silver age one that came out. I'm really hoping that they'll start a bronze age line not too long from now. Yeah. And this all kind of started like a couple of years ago over Christmas. I was at my mother-in-law's house. We were celebrating the holiday, and I was on an online seller, and they were having a big discount. And I saw all those Superman and the golden age omnis. And this idea just kind of took root in me and didn't let go of, boy, wouldn't it be cool to have a comprehensive physical library of Superman in comics, just from a historical perspective. Putting aside the fact I do plan to go through all of these, although it has been a couple of years, and to this day, they're still in that shrink wrap, but I will get to them. But I just kind of had this idea, like it would be great to have and to be able to go through the material in that kind of format, and to get a lot of it in as concentrated a burst as possible. So I've really come around on the omnibus format, even though admittedly I haven't actually read a lot in that format yet, but I've been acquiring a lot. And like I said, access. Now, we're not here specifically to talk about the DC app. That's its own conversation, which I don't know that it's even worth having, because we mention the app so often when we're doing this podcast. But I will say that when we get to our wish lists, for example, there are things that either aren't on my wish list for collected editions, or are maybe kind of far down my wish list because they're also available on the app. So for example, I'll preview my list for a second here. I would love to see the 90s Steel series starring John Henry Irons collected. I think it deserves to be. And that is on my list, but it's towards the bottom because the entire 52 issue series is available on the app. So if I or anyone else want to read it, there's a way to read it. Whereas, to also preview my list, there's the year-long run on Superman by writer Stephen T. Siegel with the CRL Supergirl and the Future Smiths. It's not my favorite run of all time, but it is inexplicably absent from the app. There's just this year-long gap there, and it's never been collected. And so I say to myself, this is something, the only way to read this is you got to track down the back issues or resort to online scans. So that's something that's a little bit higher on the list because there's no other access to it at the moment. So access is really the big thing, and I see the omnis as a kind of an effective path toward that.
That's fair. And I also considered in my list what was available on the app. And when I do my pruning, I think about the app. That's one of the big considerations. Can I get this material legitimately some way else? Then I might take that other way. And like you say about the Stephen T. Siegel run, not even because you like it, just because you feel like you need it in the collection to have it all. I wish that I could reach your levels of chill about the rest of the DCU, but I'm still very attached to the idea that, oh, well, of course I need the full run of Mark Waid Flash paperbacks. Yeah, I've read all the Mark Waid Flash, but I need to have access to them if I want to go back to them one day. I want to be able to lay around on a Saturday afternoon with my daughters when they're old enough and say, hey, look, this was the best that Flash has ever been right here, Mark Waid.
Yeah, I hear you. And like I said, there are kind of other DC stories that I will make a point to get, but for the most part recently, I've been content knowing, okay, I can read them on the app. And like I said, in terms of space, finances, and just sort of thought energy, it's been helpful to just focus on the Superman stuff. I am like you. I think the sweet spot for me in terms of my preferred format, what I feel good about buying and having on my shelf and what I like to read are those kind of meteor trade paperbacks. Like, just give me a good soft cover and I'm happy.
Yeah.
And that comes in a variety of formats. I know, especially recently, DC's been putting out these so-called books, right? Like, you and I have messaged about JLA Book 1 and JLA Book 2, and those collect about 20 issues a piece. And they're not only they're collecting the main JLA issues, but they're also collecting all the ancillary material, all the one-shots, the specials, the mini-series that were going along at the same time. So it's a really thorough, comprehensive reprinting of not just one singular title, but really that entire JLA era, which is great. And I feel like the product itself is a good value in terms of page count versus price. So that's been great. And then there's also the compendium format, which is very similar, but we're talking in that instance closer to, I know it varies depending on what volume we're talking about, but closer to like 37. Like, I looked specifically at the City of Tomorrow compendium that's coming out shortly. That collects 37 issues. So definitely thicker than those books, but same sort of idea where they're really trying to be comprehensive with an entire era as opposed to just a single title. But I like those formats a lot.
I would rather have a compendium than have nothing. If those are my choices, compendium or nothing, I'll take the compendium every time.
Yeah.
But I find the compendium even harder to read than an omnibus because it tends to be the same size as a regular trade paperback, but because it's so thick, sometimes you lose something in the middle of the pages. It's even kind of hard to keep open until you're in about the middle of the book when you can really grab on to the sides equally. I worry about damaging the thing because, even though trade paperbacks and all these hardcovers are meant to be read, I still kind of want to treat them gingerly, like I might treat an old valuable single issue if I were to read that. And then I get very fussy if I damage the dust jacket. I'm really a big fusspot about it. So the compendiums are very difficult to keep in the condition that this old fusspot would like to keep them in.
So you're talking to a fellow fusspot, and my mother has called me that over the years. So you're in good company here. I am with you. However, I guess I really just have relaxed overall. I guess that's the main takeaway here from my side, because I don't go out of my way to manhandle these books. I am still very delicate with them, and I want to keep them nice and in good condition. And even when my almost 6-year-old son comes down, he wants to look at them. It's not like I say, "Here, go nuts with it." It's we want to be careful with it. But I have relaxed on that, and there's weirdly this one volume in particular, my softcover collection of Final Crisis. That thing's like falling apart, but I take it as like a badge of honor because, man, did I read the hell out of that. And you need to. But I really felt like by the time I was done, like I had wrestled that thing, like literally and figuratively. So I'm okay with that. But I am still that fusspot because I have toyed with buying another version of it. Like I can't lie and say that I haven't. So I do hear you on that. And then, with the compendiums though. So I guess the one that I have at the moment, I will be getting that Superman City of Tomorrow one, but I have the Warworld Saga by Philip Kennedy Johnson in that compendium format. Now,
I have that too.
Now that's 24 issues versus the 37 that are going to be in the City of Tomorrow compendium. So it does range in terms of how much they collect. I haven't bought it, though I was considering this, talking about other DC properties. There's the JSA compendium line that just started. Now talk about Justice Society. That's my sweet spot. And that is so comprehensive. I don't know if you have it or you read the contents of it. That even includes the friggin' Day of Judgment miniseries.
Whoa.
True story. So that's the sort of thing. And that was collected in trade paperback years after the original story. Now it's long out of print. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, they collected Day of Judgment in the JSA compendium? Like, that's wild. But I'm there for that. I love that. I still didn't buy it, but I'm very happy that they did that.
I was buying the JSA books when they were just printed as the regular paperbacks.
Same. Those are the ones I have.
Then I was buying them again when they were doing that line as JSA by Jeff Johns volume, or did they call those books? I don't remember at this point because I've gotten rid of them.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think they were. I think so.
Yeah, and if they had kept going, I might have seen that through to the end of the Jeff Johns run, because I've got a lot of beef with Jeff Johns now, but at the JSA Jeff Johns early on, when he still had David Goyer working with him, I really loved him. And I love the Jeff Johns Flash. I have those 3 omnibuses, and I got rid of those too in some of my purge to trade down to I think there's 5 Jeff Johns Flash by Jeff Johns paperbacks that I think are good. And then
okay.
at a certain point, I think Jeff Johns gets to be too revisionist.
Yeah, no, I hear
Not
you.
even revisionist, retrovisionist, I guess. Is that a word?
It is now.
But anyway, that's a whole separate issue.
No, I hear you. Now, we talked about the books. We talked about the compendium. I have to say, far and away, my favorite relatively new line from DC that I hope explodes and they just keep pumping these out are the DC Finest. Do you have any of these yet?
I have several of them, yeah. It's a great idea.
These are great. I mean, these are, I think when they first announced them, the idea from the fan perspective was, oh, this will be akin to the Epic line from Marvel. And they are these really, again, thick, meaty, soft cover collections with, I think, a very reasonable price point for the page count. So just as an example, there's the Kryptonite Nevermore DC Finest edition, which is in the mail on its way to me as we speak. And that collects 27 issues for $40. And they're all priced at that $40 price point. And again, the amount of issues does vary, but that one collects 27. That's, I think, generally
they're all in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Kind of in that area. And they're full color, glossy paper. It's a really slick package, and you get a lot of material at an affordable price point. I mean, I have a bunch of them already, and I will continue to get more. I guess the only thing, and I'm not going to put this in the category of a negative or a complaint just yet. It's more of a question, I suppose. I don't have any of the Marvel Epic editions, but my understanding is that Marvel has them all mapped out such that, yeah, they might put out Amazing Spider-Man Volume 13 before they put out Volume 9, but they know what's going to go in each of those volumes, and they will get to all of them over time. And that gives them flexibility, because maybe there's something that's been collected many times over. They can kind of get to that later, do something else. Maybe there's a character who's going to be in a new movie. You want to push that one out, something like that. So you can jump around a little bit more, but they're numbered and they're mapped out, and you know the other ones are coming. With the DC Finest line, with the exception of things like, I know they're doing 0 Hour and the tie-ins over 2 volumes. And I know they're doing Crisis and its tie-ins over multiple volumes. Like, those are numbered, and we know that we're getting multiples. But I have Superman Family, the DC Finest Superman Family. It's not called Volume 1. So I don't know if we're ever going to get more DC Finest editions of Superman Family. And I feel I'm of two minds about this, because on the one hand, I say to myself, if they put a number 1 on it and then they never put out Volume 2, we would be complaining, where's Volume 2?
Right.
Right? So in fairness, it's like, well, they're not promising it. And in theory, if these sell well, that will pave the way for more. At the same time, I just would love more transparency, and I would love to get more of a sense of, like, what are the plans for this? Like, are we going to get a really comprehensive line-wide, over time, like, collection of the DC universe through these Finest? Or is it really going to be cherry-picking, jumping around, and we're only going to get so deep with this? Like, I just don't know. But where we are right now, I really do love the format.
I love the format. I love that there's a Superman Family. I love the Superboy book they finally came out with. For the longest time, there was no,
like, nothing
pre-crisis Superboy reprinted, except for that one hardcover of, like, the first few more fun comic issues.
Yeah.
Right? That's all we had out there. Oh, and there was the greatest Superboy team-up stories ever told. And to my knowledge, there was nothing else pre-crisis Superboy collected.
The only other thing was that Superboy 75-year hardcover collection, which included some, but as I complained about at the time, you got to the halfway point in that book and we're already at Reign of the Supermen. It's like, I mean, I love Connor more than most people, but Come
Right.
on.
Right. It was a glaring omission that now I hope will be addressed. Um, my concern about that line, and I guess maybe I'll start with I love that line because we don't want to turn it into a gripe session, but here I am concerned. Yeah, one of my concerns, as you said, was how deep are we going to get into these lines? Are we going to have the one and then never again? I don't know. That's one of my concerns because they are putting out some truly I wouldn't say baffling choices. That I don't want to call it that because I know there are fans of some of these things somewhere, and they're probably thrilled that finally they're getting something. But I don't even know if I want to call it a questionable choice. It's just a puzzling choice. I think like where do some of these choices fit in with whatever grand plan that they might have mapped out? And I don't know what forum they would go to provide us with the kind of transparency that you and I would probably like to see to be a little assured that, yes, we can invest in this line. No, it's not going anywhere. We're going to keep the trade dresses the same for Josh and Anthony and all the people out there who think about the spines of these books. So, yeah, that's my concern. But I'm also concerned that this line seems to be absorbing some lines that could stand well on their own. We just got the announcement or the solicitation for Peter David's Supergirl as part of DC Finest.
Yeah.
Well, that's only 80 issues. We got a Supergirl like 4-volume set. What was it? 10 years ago at this point? Maybe something like that. Maybe 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Could you finish that first? Can you give us the what would have taken 6 or 7 of those size paperbacks to get the whole Peter David Supergirl out? That stands on its own. That does not need to be part of the DC Finest line, I think. I really had hoped that the DC Finest line would be for all that stuff that doesn't have a home anywhere else. Like the Kryptonite Nevermore, great. That's exactly the kind of thing I want to see because there's no, having no availability of the Bronze Age comics on the app, I don't really know if there were ongoing storylines that they could have packaged some of these stories, what kind of banner they could have packaged them under.
I had the same reaction, especially to the Peter David Supergirl collection as part of the DC Finest line, because yeah, to your point, we had 4 of those prior books. So they got fairly deep into collecting the series. You say to yourself, man, could we not just finish that? But the other thing too, going back to my whole idea of just access and speed, for lack of a better term, right? Like I say to myself, okay, even if they do a subsequent volume of Supergirl by Peter David under the DC Finest banner, I mean, how many volumes is it going to take and how many years before we get to the end of it? As opposed to, look, I love that series and we're going to be talking about it not too long from now, but do I think that would necessarily warrant the omnibus treatment? Debatable, but could you do that in a couple of compendiums or in a few books or just continuing the books that were already out there? Yeah. So, I mean, that is, I think, one of the major frustrations I have had. Now we're in the gripe part of it, but this is one of the major frustrations that I've had over the years and decades now. I have been buying these editions is material that just gets collected over and over as opposed to moving forward. Like we've had the beginning part of the Peter David Supergirl run before. We've not had the end part. I mean, they did do a trade of Many Happy Returns years ago, but it's like the stuff before that. It's like, that's what I want to see collected. I mean, when they announced the first editions under the DC Finest line, one of them was the earliest appearances of Superman. And I'm saying to myself, how many goddamn times do we need to see this collected? I mean, the Omnis, the Archives, the Chronicles, it's like over and over. We see how many times do we need action number 1 collected? Take me past that. Take me to the stuff that's not been collected before. The Kryptonite Nevermore is kind of an interesting case because my hope and expectation is that we get a Superman in the Bronze Age Omni line that collects however many, 40, 50 plus issues in a single volume. And we can move forward that way, which would, in theory, get us to a comprehensive collection of that era faster than the DC Finest. But if they do end up leaning more into DC Finest, like for Superman in the Bronze Age, and we get subsequent volumes, I'm okay. It's like, I'll take it where I can get it. But that's one of those things. Like I said, I ordered it. It's coming. I'm going to be happy to have it. But I then say to myself, what does this say about the likelihood of a Superman in the Bronze Age omnibus? The fact that they're doing part of it a smaller part of it as part of the DC Finest line? Like, I don't know, but that's a question that I have.
It might make it more likely because now they have the material prepared. I presume that they save them after they remaster. I mean, that's why we're getting the first appearances of Superman and DC Finest. They have it ready.
Yeah.
They don't have to invest anything. They can pump them out. That's printing money for them. People want the first appearance of Superman who haven't gotten it before. Same thing with the early Flash that they're reprinting again. They have them ready. It's there. And then they have to go in and remaster, I guess, is remaster the right word? Recolor,
sure, refine,
whatever, metamorpho. They don't have that anywhere. So they've got to do something with that. And I guess that's their thinking just from the business end of what do we have so we can generate some revenue to then prepare these other ones and keep the cycle going. So if they have now all these extra issues of the Kryptonite Nevermore era of Bronze Age Superman, okay, well that's that much more of the future omnibus that's already prepared.
Yeah,
I hope they're thinking that logically. I hope.
You and me both, brother. But on this idea of transparency, this is something else that has been a sore spot for me over the years. And your point is well taken. Like I don't really have a solution per se. I don't know if there is an answer, but I think one of the things that's been very frustrating over the years, we have seen numerous volumes that have been solicited and then canceled because the pre-order numbers weren't high enough. And then we've seen so many lines that have started and then just kind of sputtered out, presumably because not enough people were buying them and they couldn't justify putting out more volumes. And I don't know what the answer is, but I just wish DC could communicate in some way what their benchmarks are.
Yeah.
And even if they did, I still don't know what the answer is. If when I get on here and say, like, guys, everyone who listens to this pod, I don't know that would be enough to move the needle, but like to say, guys, like they need 800 more, like you gotta buy it. I don't know, but it's just like, it always drives me nuts because I'm like, how much were they off by? Right? Like when a pre-order gets canceled or a volume dies out, it's like, how many more copies did you need to have pre-ordered or sold that this would have been worth it? Hundreds more, thousands, tens of thousands. Like, what's the benchmark here? I would love to know. It drives me nuts.
I wish that along those lines of thinking that they would do what even some other like major publishers are doing, going the Kickstarter route or Zoop or whatever. Okay, Kyle Rayner didn't get a volume 3. Let's see what like the hardcore Kyle Rayner fans would be willing to kick in to actually see that volume 3 and 4 and 5. I'm good for like $100 for something like that. Like that's how dumb I am. I've got all the single issues. I'm willing to kick in $100 to a crowdfunding campaign for a major company to have another book.
1,000%. So it's funny. I wasn't actually thinking Kickstarter, but that's a cool idea because we've seen other publishers do that. The thing I had in my mind is but I guess that's essentially what you're talking about. Some sort of print on demand feature. Yeah. And, we've seen that with manufacturer on demand DVDs and things like that. And I've always said to myself, is there not some mechanism where we can do this on the comic book front? Because especially when you're looking at these Omni lines, I use that as an example. I mean, I have all the Superman and the Golden Age ones. Someone had mapped them out on one of these forums, and I think we're still like a good 3 to 4 volumes away from having the entire Golden Age, like including the Atomic Age, that nebulous period before the Silver Age, including that. I think we're still a good few volumes away from that. So it's like, I really hope they finish that. Superman in the Silver Age, that Omni came out, I could double check on my phone, but I don't know, at least a year ago, maybe it's probably more at this point. Time it's very hard to keep track of that. I can't tell you how many times I think of an episode and I'm like, oh yeah, we did that like a year ago. And I look it up like 3 years ago, but it's been long enough that I'm scratching my head because they haven't even announced as of this recording a volume 2. And we still have not gotten a Bronze Age volume 3 a Bronze Age volume 1. And so I say to myself, if there was some sort of print on demand feature, like that Silver Age Omni volume 1 was $100. If they did a print on demand thing for the hardcore Superman fans and collectors like me who would want this, I don't know, what would I 200, 300. I don't know. I probably, if that's the way that I was going to get it, I mean, I don't know what the ceiling on that would be. I'd have to really crunch some numbers, but you know what I mean? Like I would pay a premium. Like I would understand it's not going to be the 100 from a regular, like it would be for a regular release. It's going to be significantly more. Like I would be okay with that if it's like, at least I can get it. I just want this material. So I would love whether it's a Kickstarter or print on demand because, and here's the thing, I think about this a lot too. Superman in the Silver Age, it's like, that's specific, man. I mean, like for the general comic book audience, even the general Superman audience, it's like, you know, I don't know how many people are beating down DC's door for something like this, but there is a pool of people, you know, people who grew up reading them, like Rich Roney, who comes on the show. He's our Silver Age guy. He loves that stuff. But you know, here's the thing. Rich didn't buy Superman in the Silver Age Omnibus Volume 1 because he has the archives. Like he has this material in another format and doesn't want to be made to have to buy it again. Like he wants the next round of material. But I've said to him, I'm like, you know, it's tough because then if you don't buy it, you know, we might not get Volume 2. But yeah, like, so I would love a print on demand.
I think that omnibus, does that collect all of was it 3 archives that they did for the Silver Age? Maybe
something like that.
I think it was 3. Gosh, I don't know offhand, and I don't want to look. But I think it was 3, and I think, you know, just Volume 2 would get us to the next, hadn't been collected before. And Superman Silver Age, especially now, seems like important.
Yeah.
Right? Like we got Mark Waid as like a Superman not figurehead, that's not the right word. But he's architect over there at DC. This is his thing. Let's see some of these stories that we haven't seen that might be informing the way he views Superman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, look, I think there are, credit where credit's due, I think there are some good moves. The DC Finest line overall, are questions about it aside, but overall I think it's great. And there are some smart moves. I mean, putting out Superboy, the super dog from Krypton, DC Finest edition, right before we see Krypto in the movie. Perfect. Yeah. That's what you got to do. Like, you know, you got to capitalize. And
they're finally understanding that.
Yeah. And I mean, look, from a marketing perspective, look, if someone from DC listens to this, it's like, I volunteer. Like I'm here as a resource to the in the sense that, I mean, I don't know if someone from DC reached out, whether it's to me or another podcast or whatever, and it's like, hey, we're going to put out this volume. We're going to send you a copy. I'm not just trying to get free stuff, I promise. But it's like, hey, we're going to send you a copy. Is this something you would talk about on your show? It's like, I don't know, to the extent it would move the needle, TBD, but at least it's something. It's like, I would be happy to participate if it would help get this material out there, if it would encourage further volumes. It's like, because here's the thing, DC, you know, I can't tell you the amount of times I have heard from audience members who have said that they've gone out and read or watched what we're talking about on the show, right? And I'm sure that's true for other podcasts as well. So it's like, work with the people who are having these discussions with an audience, however large or small, because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a way to kind of get a little something going. So it would be nice, some more transparency generally. And yeah, I think just in terms of the marketing and these kinds of, you know, collaborations, like something to just generate some interest, to just ensure more of it. That's all.
You know, along the lines of generating some interest, one of the things to kind of shift to a thing we like, or that they're doing really well. I love the DC Compact line.
I know you do.
I am the #1 fan, I think, of the DC Compact line. That I think is even smarter than the DC Finest line, because if what they're trying to do here as a publishing company is get readers, well, yeah, you and I are going to go out and buy all of the DC Finest Superman volumes, and then we're going to go buy the omnibuses that may or may not result from the already prepared remastered files. But, you know, the kid down the street's not going to go below $40 on that at the store. So having those $10 compact comics that give you a full story, boy, why aren't they putting those right into the movie theaters on their specially made DC Compact Comics what do you call them? Shelves, racks, the cardboard things you see in some stores.
Yeah, that format is great. And you were one of the ones, I think, singing its praises early on. And I think the first time I saw them was at our local mall. There's a Woodbury Comics, and we'll go in and we'll look around. And I remember seeing it on it was the first time I saw it. And it's a smaller, trim size, right? Only $10, and they're largely focusing on their real seminal stories. So you get Watchmen and Birthright and All Star and Hush and other things that you would expect to see. The thing I was most impressed by was the readability, because I was a little concerned that at that smaller size, might you lose some of that, but it looked real crisp, real sharp. And do I own any of them? No, but I also don't think I'm the target audience for this, but I agree with you. It's like, these are perfect to get into the hands of new readers. They are so affordable. They're focusing on their evergreen classic stories. They're very readable. You get the smaller size. You could throw it in a backpack or a purse or whatever. It's a great format. Like, that's something I tip my hat to them, because I think that's great.
At $10, even I don't care how I handle them.
Yeah.
I'll just buy another one. In fact, when the first trailer came out, well, I guess the first teaser, back in December, I went online and I bought 5 copies of All-Star Superman, because all my friends were saying, that trailer was so cool. What should I read? And yeah, I don't think All-Star Superman is the best first thing to get, but it was at the time the cheapest thing that I could get that was good. And so I bought it. I sent them to my friends. I said, here's something that you might enjoy. You might not get how it all connects, or which version of Superman you're reading here. Just go with it. Just go with it, and you'll enjoy it. And I didn't hear back from any of them. So I don't know if it was successful, but at least it's a tool. We've got a free little library set up over across the street. I went and I put a Kingdom Come and an All-Star Superman in the free little library, and they're gone. Nice. I don't know if people are enjoying them, but I know that they were taken. So this is a tool that I've been looking for years to spread the good word and get people reading this, especially in the wake of this movie that's going to make $1 trillion.
We all hope. Yeah, I mean, I think about if my comic shop were still around and I were still working there, it's like I can envision the section of those, right? And I would be happy to put them in people's hands. So yeah, again, that's great. The Finest line is great. And then, we've hit on this in various episodes along the way, but I think in large part because of the movie coming out. I mean, we've been seeing the release or solicitation of a bunch of Superman collected editions that I couldn't be happier about. I mean, to get a City of Tomorrow compendium, even if it only recollects the individual City of Tomorrow trade paperbacks that we already got, at least it's something. And then we're getting a prelude to Our Worlds at War omnibus, which hopefully previews that we're going to get an Our Worlds at War omnibus. We're getting a Superman Adventures compendium. They're putting out a bunch of Superman related material and things that, for myself in particular, I've been calling for. So I think there are a lot of bright spots. I think in terms of those pressure or pain points, like we said, that lack of transparency, these unpredictable release schedules, like in the case of the Silver Age Superman omnibus, and then like we've been hitting on, these abandoned lines. And I guess my question, and then we can segue into our wish list, but which of the abandoned lines have stung the most for you?
Well, the Kyle Rayner books, but it's not a Green Lantern podcast, but that's the one I think about and obsess over. Is I have all those single issues. I would love to reclaim that space in my limited short boxes and just say, got the trades, I'm good. But I have to have access to those. Haven't read them in years, but I have to have access to them.
Yeah, that was a heartbreaker. Now we talked about the Kyle Rayner, the Ron Mars Kyle Rayner run on Beyond Metropolis on the Patreon channel at the beginning of the year. So I've gone through all that material very recently. It reminded me they did two smaller books, and then one larger compendium that essentially recollected the books.
That's right.
And then that was it.
That was it.
And then that was it.
Never again. In fact, there's a misprint on the spine of the compendium. They called it a compendium.
Okay.
There's an N at the end and not an M. So I can't even look at the spine.
All right.
Now, because it's been abandoned, I got rid of all of them. I'm just sticking with my single issues, but I voted with my wallet. I bought them.
Yeah.
Because it's gotta try. You gotta try.
Yeah. Stuff. I remember the Chronicles. Remember the Chronicles?
I loved the Chronicles. Yeah.
Great idea. Chronological reprintings across titles of your core characters, including Superman, and then they just stop. Mm-hmm. So,
And then they had like the Superman in the Golden Age that was like the Chronicles and that they moved sequentially, but they weren't as thick as the omnibuses, but like they had a similar trade dress to the omnibus. And I love that line too.
yeah. So, I mean, it's endlessly frustrating when those things just go away. And it's one thing if they kind of pick up where it's one thing if they introduce a new line that picks up where the last one left off. No, you're not going to have that uniform shelf, right, with all the spines. Mm-hmm. But it's like, all right, at least you're getting the material and the format might change. But if that's not the case, it's tough. And
yeah.
And it's, going back to this idea of voting with your wallet, and I don't disagree with it, but it's like, it puts fans in a tough position because, and again, using my buddy Rich as an example, it's like, okay, so for him, he really would be double dipping if he bought that Superman in the Silver Age omnibus that he already owns in a different format, right? But if he wants to vote with his wallet, but then there's still no guarantee he's getting a volume 2. Right. So it's tough. I don't, your point is well taken. I don't disagree, but it's like, I hate the position it puts people in.
Oh yeah. It's a tough sell when I, especially in like the JSA Facebook group that I'm in. And we went through a similar thing with Sandman Mystery Theater. They printed a bunch of trades. I think they got like maybe 7 or 8 like little trades, stopped. And then they did the big, thick, meaty trades, did 2 of those, stopped. And all the fans were saying, we would love to have, something to pick up where we left off, but they're starting back at number 1, so I'm not going to buy it. And I was the one saying, no, just buy it anyway. And maybe people bought it anyway, and they still didn't get it. But now actually Sandman Mystery Theater is completely collected into compendiums. So we got there eventually, but it took several formats. And each time I was there buying them all. And I looking like a fool telling people to buy them, and it didn't. Ultimately, it helped, but boy, it took a long time to get there.
I hear you. So the last thing before our wish lists is we'll go through the audience submissions a little bit more specifically after, but just kind of broad strokes. Triangle Era, Loeb Kelly and Beyond, and Bronze Age were the 3 biggest categories in terms of what I heard from people.
I am part of another Facebook group called Collected Editions and Comic. Gosh, it's such a lovely group, and it's such an unwieldy name that here, as I'm saying it, I don't know what it's called. I just search in my Facebook Collected Editions, and I get there, and I asked them. I told them a month ago when you asked me to do this that I would be on a podcast talking about it and what were their votes, and they said just about what you said. They just said more DC Finest Bronze Age, more DC Finest Silver Age, more DC Finest Golden Age, and they really just wanted more of what's already coming. And on my list, I don't do any of that because it's easy to say more of that, but I'm going to try to get a little more specific.
Okay, good. So on that note, so we'll share our wish list now. And I guess similarly, I did not make this an entry on my list. And this is kind of cheating, but it kind of speaks to what you're saying, where before I even get to my list, like a big picture, I just want to see in terms of lines that are ongoing or are ongoing as far as we know, like Superman in the Silver Age. I just want more volumes, right? I just want them to continue. The fact that we're getting a prelude to Our Worlds at War, my hope and expectation is we get an Our Worlds at War omnibus. I would really love to get an Our Worlds at War Aftermath omnibus. I don't know how likely that is, but biggest picture of all, I just want the lines that are in effect to continue. We're getting Superman Adventures Compendium Volume 1. I really hope we get Volume 2. Like big picture, that's kind of a core thing. But yeah, like yourself, I tried to get a little bit more specific with the list. So we made a list of 10, right? I don't know how much weight you put into the ordering of them. I don't need to you did.
I thought something about it. Yeah,
me too. I don't need this etched in stone, but I put some thought into it. So we'll, whenever we do these top 10 lists, we'll alternate. I want to let you go first. What's number 10 on your list?
When you first asked me to do this episode, I made an impossibly long list. I went way too far. At first I thought, well, I don't really know any. And then I knew a lot. And so then you told me, oh, well, it'll just be a portion and we'll do a top 10. And I thought, how am I going to get it there? And so I started lumping things together in categories. And I ended up with a category called Let's Finish It for People. And so, of that category, one made it into my top 10. And I think it was someone on the Patreon, actually, who pointed out that Superman Batman could be fully collected with a volume 7. When they did those Meteor Superman Batman volumes, they got to 6, stopped at 7. They could have finished the series. Let's just finish it for people. I don't know that any of the stories at the end of that series were good. I stopped caring about those stories, but for a few after Loeb left. But we're so close. Let's just cross the finish line on that line. Call it a day.
Nice. I dig that. Yeah, and that was one of our patron suggestions. So echoed by Josh for number 10. My number 10, I previewed earlier. I want to see that 90s John Henry Irons series collected. It is on the app, but I want to collect it in physical form. It ran for 52 issues, plus a couple of annuals or whatnot, or a 0 hour issue, number 0. But essentially about, 50 plus issues. And so I feel like that's something that you could do in one omnibus. Like we've talked about, that's maybe not necessarily our favorite format of all time. And I also, this is not a knock on Steel, but it's like, it's hard to say like what warrants an omnibus per se, what DC feels warrants an omnibus. I don't know. My gut with this would be that a couple of compendiums would be a nice way to do this. I wouldn't mind the book approach, like we talked about with JLA book 1, book 2, but
that would be fine.
In the intro, I don't know, it's tough. Part of me feels like one omnibus. So at least we know we're just getting it all and we're done.
That would be a thick omnibus though, right? Would that not be on the thicker end?
Well, so good question. I looked this up. So the forthcoming Superman in the Triangle Era omnibus, by the way, the Triangle Era omnis overall is another huge bright spot. The fact that we're getting these, but the forthcoming volume 2 collects 57 issues.
My goodness.
For $150. So it is conceivable to do Steel in one omnibus. But like I said, not our favorite format. I don't know if it would quite warrant that. I would be good with a couple compendiums. I think that would be an elegant way to go for Steel. So that's my number 10. Number 9 for you?
Number 9, I have a continuation of the Superman Elseworlds line.
Nice.
I thought you could throw in Distant Fires. Did you ever read that?
No, I did. It's funny though. We touched on some Elseworlds over the years on the show. There's more to do there. And so I've done some mapping, I'll put it that way. I've done some mapping of what that would look like. So I haven't read that, but it is on my radar.
Well, Distant Fires, I thought was one of the better ones of Superman out there.
This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. We all love the big budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of unbridled creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and much more. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. My number 9, this will not be a huge shock, but we're starting on a little bit of a theme here. So my number 9 is the 90s Superboy series, that 100 issue series, which The fact that issue 100 is the only issue from that entire series missing from the app drives me freaking crazy. And if there is anyone from DC who's listening who has anything to do with the app, what is with these weird little gaps here and there? It's baffling to me. But look, I love, even though, I mean, it's funny, like we talked about that whole series recently, and I was probably most positive about those final few issues by Dan DiDio and Jimmy Palmiotti, where he's a building superintendent. But it's a fun series, and I love the character, and it would be great to have that. At this point, it's been so many years since that book 1, Trouble in Paradise. I don't expect that we're ever going to get a book 2. This is another instance where I think the compendium format would be an effective way. And look, if you really want to be comprehensive, and the compendiums seem to be, you throw in Superboy and the Ravers as well along the way and really round this out. So I think that's something that probably 3-volume set. I think for Steel, you do 2 compendiums. For Superboy 3, you throw in the Ravers. That's my number 9. But all right, so you're number 8.
My number 8, I called this the why not category. And this is a DC Finest. I don't know if you want to call it a line, a run. I called it a DC Finest, the annuals. There are a lot of those year 1 annuals that they came out with. Was that 94, 95? Somewhere in there. I want a full line of the year 1. I want a full line of Legends of Dead Earth. There were some great issues in there that don't fit anywhere else, because were they Elseworlds? Were they not Elseworlds? Unclear. But there were some really cool things in there that deserves to be collected somewhere. And a lot of these things aren't on the app because DC apparently thinks that we don't care about full runs of the titles. And the annuals, even when the annuals are throwaways and not connected to the ongoing title, which is actually how I prefer an annual. I want an annual to be skippable. I just want it to be really good, so I don't want to skip it. They need to be accessible. So I want to be able to pick up my Pulp Heroes DC Finest and read all of those.
Right on. My number 8, concluding this kind of trilogy to kick off my list here, is that Peter David Supergirl series, which I've only ever read kind of the beginning and end of. I think that's basically what I've read, and I will be reading the entire thing in full, and most likely I'll be reading it on the app. But yeah, it would be great to have that in physical form. This is yet another instance. I mean, this series ran 80 issues. I think the compendium format would work well. I mean, like, this is an instance where, like we've been talking about, they did 4 books. I don't know offhand exactly what issue they got to. In an ideal scenario, even though I don't have those books, but like in an ideal scenario, it would be great if they could start with a compendium that picks up where those books left off. And then maybe later you go back and you fill in the compendium format, those earlier issues. I doubt that's what their approach would be, if they even touch this at all, because now, like we said, they're doing this seemingly as part of the DC Finest line. How far are they going to go? Like, I don't know. Omnibus, once again, is an option. And I know that they are putting out omnis of the Peter David Young Justice series. So it's like, I don't know, not beyond the realm of possibility, especially with a Supergirl movie coming out. And, sadly with the recent passing of Peter David, again, it wouldn't shock me if they did omnis of this run, but whether it's that or compendiums, I would like to see that collected in full. It deserves it. I think it's a very interesting series, and especially with the movie coming out, it feels like, even though it's a very different version of Supergirl, but it's like, it feels like it's worth trying to tap into.
I hope so. I would love to have that full series printed nicely so I can clear out the short box drawer.
Yeah. All right, you're number 7.
My number 7 was from a category I called "Let's Make This Accessible to New Readers," and that's the Greg Rucka run on Adventures of Superman in a nice, thick, meaty edition of one. I don't even know how many issues there were. Could you do it in 1? Could you do it in 2?
You could do it in 1. So, okay, this is an instance where we have some overlap. So that's actually my number 5 is Adventures of Superman by Greg Rucka. He was on the book for basically 20 issues. A few more if you want to include that entire Sacrifice arc that spanned the Superman books and an issue of Wonder Woman, which I would want to include in that. So
I would, yeah.
A couple dozen issues for that run. So that's a single softcover volume, whether you call it, that, like the Warworld saga, that was 24 issues. That was a compendium. So maybe compendium would be the format for this. You could do an omni, would be a slimmer omni. You have some flexibility, but that either way, that's 1 volume.
Yeah.
And that was collected in trades back in the day. They're all out of print now. And this is another instance. I've complained about this so many freaking times. Just MIA from the app, except for a few issues. It's like, what are we? And this is Greg Rucka. Like, I don't understand. Very popular writer, big runs on Wonder Woman, Batman. It's like, why would you not have this out there?
And I'd love to say that it's because DC is on the outs with Greg Rucka that they don't do it. But they've just put out the Wonder Woman by Greg Rucka omnibus. So, like, it's not that they're shy about their work with Greg Rucka. So let's have it. Those were great Superman issues at a time that there were not a lot of other great Superman issues. Like that was the shining light of those few years.
Oh, you don't have a Chuck Austen compendium on your list?
No, I know you do now that you're a big Chuck Austen fan.
Oh, yeah.
Superman Metropolis.
Superman Metropolis, I think, should have a trade paperback collection. That's not on my list, though. But yeah, no. So that's actually my number 5. So yeah, I mean, like, that's a single volume. It seems like such a no-brainer. Get those friggin' issues on the app. Put out a collected edition. He's a very popular writer. It's a great run. You know, Pete Ross has a big role in it. There's a lot of reasons for this. But okay, cool. So that was your number 7, right?
Right.
Okay, so my number 7, from generally the same period of time, I had previewed this as well, was the Superman run by Stephen T. Siegel. Now, like I said, not my favorite run of all time. You might be shocked that I would give up a spot on my list for it, but for the sake of completeness, and this is coupled by the fact that it's not on the app. If it were on the app, I don't think I would make this an entry, but it's just like, I don't, and this is, if anyone is listening from DC, like, if you could shed any light, like, I would genuinely love to know, like, why are those 12 issues not on the app? It's really kind of inexplicable to me. And see, here's the nice thing. So that was the run, like I said, that dealt with this new Supergirl, CRL. We got a Supergirl movie coming out. Call this Superman, The Coming of CRL, The Mystery of CRL, whatever you want to call it. Right. Or throw Supergirl in the title there somewhere. But you could kind of have it tie in. And he was on the book for 12 issues. It was a year-long run, culminated in the milestone issue 200. If you really want to be complete, you could throw in the It's a Bird original graphic novel, a very different type of story.
That would not fit, but I can see why you would do it.
If you were doing like the complete Superman-related works of Stephen T. Siegel, if you really wanted to round it out, you could. But a single volume collecting that year-long run, incorporate Supergirl into the title, release it, tying into the movie. I just feel like, and there's interesting stuff in there. And yeah, just for the sake of completeness, it's just like this weird gap. So that's my number 7.
And along those same lines, and this is not a wish list item, but this is like a big picture wish list item. So, okay, they have now, especially with DC Finest, they have all these issues digitized, presumably restored. Put them on the app. You have them now. Why are they not on the app? Is it a different file? It seems so easy. Okay, I've got Jimmy Olsen 20 ready now. Let's give him Jimmy Olsen 20 on the app.
So that's actually a very good question, and something that I have been wondering myself, because for those of us at the ultra tier of the DC app, you have access to these collected editions as well as the individual issues. Thus far, they have not put any of the DC Finest collected editions on the app. But to your point, even if you're not putting the actual trade itself, you can put the individual issues that are collected, or even some of them, like something. Like if you now have these readily available, yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you 100% on that. Okay, so I guess that was my number 7 was Stephen T. All right, so you're number 6.
Another I called the let's make this accessible to new readers. And actually, this is let's make it accessible to new readers because of the movie. And that's a DC compact edition of Loban Sales' Superman work. So you got the 4 issues of For All Seasons at least. And then, there's all those other little things that you could throw in there if you feel like a 4-issue, even 4-issue prestige format books don't quite make the substantial enough DC compact. Because if James Gunn has these images plastered on his walls as he's making this movie, there's got to be something in there that people who see this movie and say, "Oh, I like Superman now. What can I get that feels like some of that?" I mean, you can't beat the $10 price for for an impulse purchase of a person who's never read a comic and now wants to because of this movie.
Well, A, I'm shocked that that's not one of the compact line books, so I wholeheartedly co-sign on that. And B, yeah, it's like I would much sooner give a new reader For All Seasons than I would give them All Star. I get why you gave your buddies that, but it's like, yeah, I mean, For All Seasons, like I've said this before. It's like if my mom was like, I want to read a comic, I would give her For All Seasons. It's like, yeah, go for it.
Exactly right. And when Birthright comes out, that's going to be my new giveaway. Yes. I'm going to buy 10 of those and just give them away.
And the most recent soft cover collection of For All Seasons, which I have, has basically, I think, everything that you're alluding to, right? So there's the prom night story from Tim Sale's issue of Solo, which is narrated by Martha. It's great. It has Sam's story that they had done, and When Clark Met Bruce, that little two-parter. So yeah, you can round it out with Loeb and Sale's other Superman collaborations. Yeah, that absolutely. All right, my number 6 is, I guess we're also in a little bit of a theme here, Adventures of Superman by Joe Casey. This is another instance, almost entirely MIA, except for Joe Casey's earliest issues, which fell when we were still more firmly in the Loeb Kelly era. But once we get past that on the app, it's not there. And he was on the book, all told, 37 issues. So that could be a compendium. That could be an omnibus. Again, do I think Adventures of Superman by Joe Casey you could really sell that as an omni? Probably not. But as a compendium, I mean, I guess here's the other question for you. Maybe this is easy with Greg Rucka, because I think he's a big enough name. But when we get into the realm of Joe Casey, it's like, I'm biased because I love that run and we covered it on the show. And it's like, no, there's some good stuff there. And it's not on the app at all. It's like, get this out there. But like, this is an instance where is the name big enough to sell this as Superman by Joe Casey? Or do you kind of put this into some other umbrella? Like, I'll get to this a little bit later, but one of our audience members suggested a line of trades. The rough working titles like Road to Infinite Crisis, like something capturing that post-Loeb Kelly, but pre-Infinite Crisis, 1 year later time period. It's like, I don't know if the Joe Casey thing, like maybe that needs a larger umbrella that would help sell it a little bit more. I don't know, but either way, I want to collect it. I would be fine with a creator-centric, title, but maybe it needs something else to kind of juice it a little bit.
Well, I hope that they don't juice it with DC Finest, because I see a lot of guys in a DC Finest group that I'm in on Facebook, like really jonesing for like the Death of Superman DC Finest edition. Like, oh, hold on, that's its own thing. It's its own world.
Yeah.
Let's leave that alone. So I would hate to see Joe Casey shoehorned into DC Finest just to give him an umbrella. I mean, I'd sooner call that book Superman, the stories nobody read and nobody talks about. Like, something that insulting rather than put them in their prestigious DC Finest line, because it doesn't belong there. That's all I know.
Yeah.
I don't know where it does belong, but I know it doesn't belong there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of an interesting question. And it's funny. I think maybe this now is starting to show our age, but like, when I saw I guess in my mind with DC Finest, initially I'm thinking of it as like much older material. And then,
me too.
And then see, even 0 Hour, I felt like, oh, like we're walking a line here, yes. But like, okay. But then when I saw that Peter David Supergirl thing, I was like, whoa, pump the brakes here. What are we doing? But that, that was in the it was in the 90s or very early 2000s it ended, I want to say. So, it is pretty old. It doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel that way. But I guess that is kind of an interesting question. It's like, what is kind of their cutoff for DC Finest? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it should be, but I in my heart of hearts, I kind of like it more as collecting this more classic older material as opposed to modern day stuff, where I do still feel like a compendium or a series of quote unquote books is a better vehicle for it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. You're number 5.
My number 5, this is from the, I want this for myself category. And I cheated also. And I think you'll allow me to cheat as you cheated in one of your earlier entries.
Oh yeah.
This is a tie. I either want a curated volume. Remember they used to do curated volumes and we would get books like Amazing Transformations of Jimmy Olsen.
Yep.
And Superman. What do I have here? Superman and the Daily Planet. And we get Daily Planet stories and Superman versus Brainiac. And we get a few Brainiac stories. I kind of miss that. uh, there's something to be said now for having DC Finest and having at least the possibility that one day everything will be collected, and won't that be great? But some of that old stuff, a little goes a long way. And it would be nice if we had an expert who like thought about these things to tell me, okay, you know what? Here are the few Brainiac stories you'll really enjoy. And there are more out there, but these really deserve your attention. And so this entry with these two items are both along that idea that we're going to curate this thing. Let's get Mark Waid to choose them if possible. And the first idea is a book called Superman's Craziest Powers. So any Silver Age, Atomic Age, Bronze Age issue where he gets some kind of crazy new power that's only around for an issue or two, I want to see that. Like I bought the showcase Superman in what year was that? Like 2004 or 5. They had the black and white volumes, like the Marvel Essential Editions. I bought that because I wanted to read that story in which Superman could shoot little Supermen from his hands. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
He could shoot little Supermans from his hands and they would go be like Superman and like save the day. And then by the end, he felt like he felt bad and he felt inferior and inadequate and like he wasn't needed. And like, I think he destroyed them somehow. And I'd like to see that in color. I don't know anymore what issue that was off the top of my head, but I'd love to read it again. I'd love for other people to read it. So crazy powers like that. Or if we're not going to give me the powers book, give me the red kryptonite transformations.
Yep.
What are the best ones? I've never read the one where he has that lion head. I have the action figure of it on my shelf, but I've not read the story. Or the ant head, or the big bulbous bald head. I'd like to read all of those. But I'm sure I don't need to read, 1,000 issues to see those. I'd like someone to show me these are the 8 red kryptonite stories that are really good.
So this allows me a little bit of a cheat because I was toying with making this one of my own entries, but now I'll just let you do it and I'll piggyback on yours and that frees up a spot for me. But yes, 1,000% yes, curated volumes. I mean, I can't tell you over the course of doing this podcast, those types of volumes have been incredibly helpful because there's just like this vast sea of pre-crisis material. And it's really helpful to have these curated editions that just kind of lay them out and group them by a similar theme, character, topic, whatever it is. I mean, I'm looking on my shelf and I have the Superman in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, those decades trades, most of which are out of print. I know they did a new edition of the Superman in the 50s, and I think they just solicited a new Superman in the 70s, I want to say, because it's the one that has the introduction by Christopher Reeve.
But I don't think there's anything new in that one.
No, that's the thing. And my understanding is even the 50s one that they re-released was the same material. So it's like, I would love all of them to come back in print. I would love them to do additional volumes within that. But things like that, the amazing transformations of Jimmy Olsen, like that was a huge help when I was doing my recent Jimmy thing. It drove me crazy that when we did our recent discussion on the many shades of kryptonite, there's no curated kryptonite edition. Like if I had to pick one of those curated editions, I would love something about kryptonite. The varieties, their first appearances, or most significant stories. So, and I also feel like, as we've been saying, these omnis, I think they can be a tough sell. It's a very specific market for the Silver Age omnibus. But if you do something like Superman's Crazy Powers or the Many Shades of Kryptonite, you'll grab people with that.
Yes.
And maybe that's also one of the things, like if those numbers are through the roof, maybe that helps push out for further Silver Age omnis because it's like, oh, there's actually an appetite for something like this. So I think it's a good way to test the waters, but also to really grab people. So yeah, I'm all for that. I wish we could see more stuff like that.
Well, especially with that Kryptonite series that's coming out, that looks really interesting.
Yeah, the Kryptonite Spectrum. Yeah, the Black Label thing. Yeah,
yeah. Give me some background before I get into that. Let me see what they're drawing from.
I mean, literally, Bernie and I recorded our episode on the Many Shades of Kryptonite, and then they made that announcement. I'm like, are you kidding me with this? Anyway, but I'm glad they're doing that. Okay, so wait, what number was that for you? 5?
That was my 5.
All right, so you already heard my 5, which was Adventures of Superman by Greg Rucka. So it goes right back to you, my friend. You're number 4.
Oh, okay. Another line of, I want this for myself. a curated Superman's best imaginary stories. And
Oh,
we could have
nice.
several varieties. His best imaginary stories in which he and Lois get married. The best imaginary stories in which he and Lois have children, if there's enough that there couldn't be like overlap in the one volume. The best imaginary stories in which Superman dies, called The Many Deaths of Superman.
Yep.
And how many Death of Superman fans will run out and get that because they want to have all the deaths of Superman. So
Yeah.
I want to see more of those, more curated collections of the imaginary stories, because we got like a DC's greatest imaginary stories years ago with that great cover that I buy a poster of if they'd make one. We got then a volume 2 of like the greatest imaginary stories, Batman and Robin, and then it was over.
Yeah, no, I'm on board with that, and I think those are great picks. And it's, you know, it's like, as you're saying it, it's crazy to me that they don't exist. So yeah, that would be fantastic. All right, so that was your number 4. My number 4, I guess this is a little bit of a cheat, but it's okay. I'm gonna allow it because it's all from the same period of time. So the post Infinite Crisis, pre New 52 period of time, that about 5-year stretch of DC. Now we're getting the Superman by Kurt Busiek not oversized, they're standard trim, but they're thick hardcovers collecting all of his Superman work, including his stories during that time. So I feel like his corner is pretty well represented, but it's kind of bonkers to me that we don't have a Superman by Jeff Johns omnibus. I know we have the Absolute, but that focused on only his work with Gary Frank. He did more with other artists.
Right.
So I would love an Omni line of that period of time focusing on the Jeff Johns work. Like, I think that could be its own entry. That's why this is a little bit of a cheat, but the Jeff Johns stories, and then the New Krypton saga. I want that collected in full. It was about 100 issues. This is another instance where, for the sake, you know what? I'm going to plant my flag here, since I started with the Jeff Johns omnibus, and for the sake of just trying to get this out while we're still alive, I think a couple of 2, maybe 3, depending on how much they push the page count, 2 or 3 omnis collecting the entire New Krypton saga in publication order, aka triangle numbering order, because they brought back the triangle numbers for that. Because the way, and I know you know this, when they originally collected it, they did it by titles. So like you had the Nightwing and Flameberg stories from one of the titles, and the Mon-El stories from another title, and the World of New. And it's just, I feel like you got to read it following the actual chronology. So that's the way I would want to collect it. You could do compendiums or books, but I think I would like a 3 to 4 omni set of the Jeff Johns stuff leading right into New Krypton. So that's my number 4.
That's a good pick. And publication order is real important there. If for some reason they poo-pooed that, I would be okay with maybe you do 2 or 3 issues of the Nightwing and Flamebird stuff, and then you go back to the New Krypton, and then you go back to Mon-El for 3 or 4 issues.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be exact publication order. Maybe you need chunks strung together, since all of these single issues nowadays are written for the trade. It might be hard to keep up with the threads if you're going in true publication order. But yeah, I loved that era. As much of a problem as I was having with Jeff Johns elsewhere by that time, I thought that if you're going to do that version of Superman and you're going to try to pretend Birthright never happened, okay, he was at least making Superman look like Christopher. Well, Gary Frank was making Superman look like Christopher Reeve, but Jeff Johns was trying to make Superman sound and act like Christopher Reeve. So, you know, that was a sacrifice I was willing to make. That was pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun going through that entire New Krypton saga, and they are all on the app, as is all of the Jeff Johns stuff. So you can read it, but I mean, I think, you know, putting out those omnis would really shine a light on it. And I feel like it's one of those things a lot of people, including myself until recently, really like slept on. And I feel like if you say, like, look, like there's this 100-issue long saga, unfortunately the ending does leave a bit to be desired. It was very rushed and felt a bit anticlimactic.
Oh yeah, that was
but a lot leading up to was really interesting stuff, and everything with Clark and Zod, like it's good stuff. So that would be my number 4. All right, your number 3.
My number 3 is a back in print. And we could do as many editions as DC would be willing to publish of Superman Family Adventures. I want a big, thick hardcover for myself because I love that series. I want some nice kid-sized paperbacks for kids to read it. We've got this big Superman movie coming out, and we don't have anything to put in the hands of kids. Like, I'm a freak, so I buy up all of the Tiny Titans used books that I see in used bookstores, and when I see them on comic shop shelves, I pick up the used Superman Family Adventures trades that they did put out back when that series was still like more current, more timely. But I mean, a mom who doesn't even know that exists, and her kid is saying, "Hey, I want to see Superman," and she says, "Well, it's PG-13. I don't know if I can take you to see Superman." And he says, "Well, what can I read?" And she doesn't know. I'd love to be able to put Superman Family Adventures in her hand because that is great stuff for everyone. That's one of those books, and DC is actually really good about it compared to Marvel. They don't do young reader books. They do all ages books. And I read Superman Family Adventures in my 30s for the first time and loved it. And my daughter is now obsessed with Tiny Titans. I want to see those books back in print. Let's make this my entry is Art and Franco's DC work in good, thick, meaty editions for the adults who got all of the jokes that the kids don't get, and the kids to have something to read to engage with these characters. My daughter is running around pretending to be Wonder Girl, Donna Troy.
Wow.
No other kid in the world is pretending to be Donna Troy right now. My daughter is because of Art and Franco, the two greatest guys with the best DC comics of the past 20 years.
Amen. Yeah, that seems like a great opportunity to capitalize on. I love that. All right.
And why they're not capitalizing on it, I couldn't tell you. They have it. It's right there. Churn it out. Get it on shelves. Put it in the movie theater lobbies. Put it in the Barnes & Noble graphic novel section. Put it in the Barnes & Noble kid graphic novel section. Did you know there was that section? There's a whole kid graphic novel section in the kids area.
Yeah.
I stumbled upon that. I was looking for Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, those kind of smaller sized reprints. That's where they are.
Nice. All right, my number 3. So this will come as no surprise, especially given all of our recent coverage. But I guess I'll start specific, but then I'll kind of widen it out just to make sure I'm covering everything. But we're getting the City of Tomorrow compendium, which collects the first big chunk of the Jeff Loeb, Joe Kelly era of the Superman titles. It goes right up until Emperor Joker. It stops right before Emperor Joker, if I'm not mistaken. And then we do have an in-print version of Emperor Joker, so that's at least covered. And then we're getting the Our Worlds at War portion. In between, I feel like there's a great opportunity to do a President Luthor compendium. And that would basically collect, I mean, I wouldn't mind if that also caught up Emperor Joker just so that it has another home, but I could go, I'm not going to die on that hill. If Emperor Joker stands on its own in its own deluxe edition hardcover, that's fine. But if nothing else, that period right after Emperor Joker, all the way up until Our Worlds at War, or the prelude to Our Worlds at War, that's what I would want to see collected. And that also includes Action 775, and that includes the Return to Krypton, but that whole chunk of Superman stories in a compendium. And I don't have the exact number of issues written down, but I had kind of mapped it out and it would be appropriate. So I think a compendium there. And then kind of along this line, so between the City of Tomorrow compendium, my hypothetical President Lex compendium, and then these Our Worlds at War omnis, at least 2 that we're getting, that then represents the Loeb Kelly era. But then we still kind of have like this orphaned material after, right? Because there were those final issues of Loeb and McGinnis on the title. Mark Schultz had a few more, well, almost about a year's worth of our Man of Steel issues before that got canceled. Joe Kelly stayed on Action for a while longer. Joe Casey as well, we already talked about. So I don't know what the appropriate solution is there. I know one of the things a bunch of our audience members suggested, an Action Comics by Joe Kelly omnibus, or Superman by Jeff Loeb omnibus. So if you were to do that, then that would be an opportunity to kind of catch those last stray issues. So that could work. Or I again, I don't know how likely this is, but if we're getting Prelude to Our Worlds at War, and then some sort of aftermath volume, that could catch up the rest of it. So regardless of where it gets collected, I would love to see that collected. So to have that entire era. So that's kind of big picture, but really narrowly, specifically that President Lex compendium. I feel like that's just waiting there, to be grabbed.
Mm-hmm. Especially now.
Yeah.
Are any of those issues not on the app? Does the app start getting kind of spotty at that point?
I have to double check there. I feel like in the Loeb Kelly era, it's a little spottier early on. Like there are weirdly like a couple issues of Adventures of Superman that are not there, but I think it's in the earlier stretch. I think what would be collected in the President, I think those are all on the app. I'd have to double check. Okay. But you know what? Well, this kind of goes both ways. You know what's not on the app in and of itself? The Lex 2000 one shot where Lex is elected president.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Now, that drives me crazy.
If you have the Ultra tier and you read the President Luthor trade, it's there, but like that issue is not there.
Yeah.
So yeah, which feels like, come on. So so that's my pick for number 3. I really want to see that era like fully represented, and we're getting closer, but and I feel like that President Lex thing is just between City of Tomorrow and Our Worlds at War would really just kind of shore up a lot of that.
One of these days, you really do have to do an episode where you just scream for 2 hours about what's not on the app. Wouldn't that be cathartic? Just, why isn't this on the app? Okay, next item.
Yeah.
Why isn't this on the app? Just get angrier and angrier each one.
It's insane. All right, we're nearing the end here. You're number 2.
My number 2, a new idea that I thought of for famous creators' favorite stories. So yeah, I want curated lines, and I want whoever thinks about these things to do them. And I do want Mark Waid involved, but I'd love to have a volume specifically called Mark Waid's favorite Superman stories. Grant Morrison's favorite Superman stories. And actually, I think Grant Morrison did a Substack with a list of his favorite Superman stories.
But no, that's such a great idea. And I'm sure you're aware, right? There was the Black Case book that came out before or during Morrison's Batman run. All the stories that inspired Morrison. Like the fact that there's no Superman equivalent edition to go with All-Star Superman. Because clearly Morrison was pulling from so much and the Silver Age stories and whatnot. It's like, it seems like such a no-brainer. Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer, but
yeah. But no, I love that.
You could open it up and even say like, okay, Brandon Routh, what are your favorite Superman stories? Or what did you read to inspire you and how you played Superman? I don't know if there is anything there, but get David Corenswet, get James Gunn, get Zack Snyder, get all the big names in Superman. Why not?
It's okay. I feel like, especially with this idea of the curated ones, but even stuff like I mentioned with, like that Stephen T. Siegel Superman run that features a new Supergirl, right? I feel like, and I don't say this to be disrespectful to the DC folks. Like I'm sure a lot of thought goes into this. I hope a lot of thought goes into this.
Right. I hope.
But I guess I feel like we are, I think fair to say, like we're approaching this in a thoughtful way, things that we want, but also kind of putting on our marketing hats and thinking about like, okay, like what would sell? And that's why sometimes I'm just scratching my head because some of these things, like we keep going back to this term like no brainer, but it just feels like, well, why not try to capitalize on things like this? Like to use those names and certainly with everyone involved with the current Superman movie, that feels like a very natural thing to do.
Yeah.
All right, my number 2, this is not particularly creative and when we get to our audience submissions, a bunch of people call this one out, but A Road to the Triangle Era Omnibus. Right now, Big picture, like I said at the top, we've gotten Triangle Era Volume 1, Volume 2 is forthcoming. My hope and expectation is that line continues and takes us all the way through the Triangle Era. So that's why I didn't make a specific entry for that. But as people have pointed out, there is a block of issues before the Triangle Era starts. And that's and there's a decent amount of that's missing from the app because there were issues of Adventures of Superman I had to go buy on eBay to read. So I would love A Road to the Triangle Era Omnibus or Triangle Era Volume 0, like whatever you want to call it. But fill in that gap. That's what we got to have. All right. Your number one pick.
My number one pick was either hinted at or said directly by someone on the Patreon. And I expanded it. I want all of the Superman backups and all of the features that ran through Superman Family.
Yeah.
I want a whole book called The Private Life of Clark Kent. I want a whole book called The Fabulous World of Krypton. I want a whole book called Lois Lane Girl Reporter from the early days of Superman when she had like little 4-page stories. Yeah, I think some of those girl reporters, if not all of those girl reporters, are collected in the big omnibuses that I have behind me. But you know, I would love to say, hey, here's my 10-year-old niece. Let's have like cool Lois Lane stories from when she was actually like being kind of a reporter before she was just obsessed with marrying Superman. Let's put those girl reporter stories right in her hands and see what she makes of that. We know it's kid appropriate because they were being written for 8-year-olds back then, so should be good. So however many I could get of that kind of thing, all the backups that sometimes, you know, you get a collected edition, or you get some of those issues in a collected edition somewhere and they cut out the backup material.
Yeah.
But that's the material I'm most interested in because I can't get it anywhere. Or if I do, I'm paying $20 for an old brown copy of a 1969 comic or something, and it's just not as vibrant to read. You know, it's not as easy a sell for my eyes to read old browned paper. One person I have to add the person who singled out the Mr. and Mrs. Superman feature from Superman Family, because that's the thing that really I thought, oh gosh, this isn't somewhere. Forget the imaginary story volume that I want of Superman and Lois married. They actually did get married pre-crisis. It was just the Earth 2 versions, and there's like no record to a modern audience looking for that unless they know to dig into Superman Family and wherever else that might have happened. I know they married in Action 484, but I don't know where else that continued other than Superman Family.
So a couple of things. Well, first of all, I love that suggestion, but a couple of things. So one, real quick, it's funny when you mentioned backup stories, it did make me think of a relatively minor gripe, but a gripe that I have about current collected edition practices. I don't know if you were following this, but the softcover collections of Philip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics run, the last few of them, volume 2 of that only collected the backup stories from Action Comics and maybe like the Night Terrors thing or something like that. But it wasn't Philip Kennedy Johnson's main full stories. And the solicitation was unclear. Like I had to go to secondary source online to actually see people who cited what the actual contents were. And I skipped over that. I ordered the volume 3 because that had the actual main stories. But that's some shady business. I don't like that. And if you're going to do that, you better be crystal clear about what's in that volume. Yeah. So that really irked me. And then similarly, like of the Joshua Williamson Superman series, as of this recording, we're awaiting the imminent release, or I think it might have just come out, Rise of the Superwoman. But the volume before collects like, I don't know, 4 issues. Like it's so thin. Yeah. I don't care for that either. So super thin trades or trades that collect backup stories. Not a fan of those.
Oh, I wanted those backup stories. In fact, when the Philip Kennedy Johnson paperbacks came out and they didn't have the backup stories, I was steaming angry. And actually then when I discovered that they were collected, it just wasn't clear. Then I kind of felt weird, like you're saying, like you thought you were getting Superman and you kind of didn't. I was thinking, well, I'll buy a volume of what was even the backup stories? Was it Tales of Metropolis or something? Yeah. They were fine. I liked them. I wanted them. I didn't even know that I was buying them when I bought that volume 2. I just assumed there was Superman in there.
Yeah, and for the record, I'm not saying they shouldn't be collected, but just collect them with the main issue. Right. Or if you are going to make it its own volume, just be clear about what it is. Number it volume 2 in a series and like hide the ball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was a whiff. But you know, this is the other big thought that I had as we're talking about all of this stuff, right? Like from DC's perspective, especially all of these curated things that we're talking about. And you really brought up a lot of great ideas here, as did a bunch of our patrons. And it's one of those things where if you were to ask DC, I mean, I suspect the response is probably something along the lines of, we don't think there's enough marketplace interest in something like this. But is that the case? Or is it that like people don't even know about this? Right. And if you put it out there and you marketed it effectively and you utilized podcasts and websites and stuff like that to like get the word out and to have discussions, to have like these, this is more of a separate thing, but like the publishers always talk about the retailers as their partners, right? And but that's another thing too. And like a lot of comic shops, they do book club events and things like that. It's like, I feel like there's a way, and maybe this is too small scale. I really don't know, but I also don't know because there's not enough transparency and I don't know what benchmark they need to hit. But I just feel like, there's a way to maybe nurture some interest, generate some interest in this stuff. If people know that it's there. I mean, I like the idea of the Mr. and Mrs. Superman stories, like fascinating. I've read almost none of that stuff. I'm very curious myself, but that's still kind of a black box for me. So yeah, it's like if you put this stuff out there, you might find that there's interest, you might create interest. All right. My number one is not the biggest shock, I don't think at all, but I want more pre-crisis Superboy material collected. This DC Finest Super Dog from Krypton, great start, but whether it's through more Finest editions or an Omni line, I need pre-crisis Superboy collected. Just like we have the Superman in the Golden Age and we started with silver and we're hoping for bronze, I want that for Superboy as well. And especially with Mark Waid's open-ended run on Action Comics, which he said it's open-ended and he confirmed he's planning to stick with Clark as Superboy. This feels like as perfect a time as ever to try to capitalize on that. So that's my number one.
Definitely. And all those Superboys that long overdue after all the years that we've been deprived of having the material. Forget having the character. I as a child of the post-crisis, I did not miss the character, but I was still curious to like see what it was.
Yeah.
And especially you tell me Bizarro first appeared in Superboy. Didn't Zod first appear in Superboy?
The Phantom Zone did. I forget offhand if Zod was named in that. I knew it. Well, I don't remember it right now, but definitely the Phantom Zone was first in Superboy.
Well, so there are a lot of things, big things that are first in Superboy. At least give us those.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you did a curated thing, I don't know what you would call it, but something that captures
famous first
elements of the Superman mythology that were introduced in Superboy comics. Boom. Yeah. So big picture pre-crisis Superboy collections, more specifically, I would be happy with a line of Omnis that come out on a regular schedule, but I would take more DC Finest. I would take a curated thing, whatever, but I would definitely want more of that.
I guess if we're thinking about a wish list, more than just like what we want collected, but how we want them collected, I'd put on the wish list that schedule that you're talking about. What is a regular schedule? Is it one a year? Is it two a year? I might really think about my comic budget more carefully if I knew, okay, in December, I got to be ready for that maybe $150 giant Superboy omnibus. So let me know that it's coming in December or in December and in June. Whatever it is, stick to that schedule. I'm encouraged by the DC Finest, how there's got to be 3 or 4 of these things a month, right?
I haven't tallied it up, but yeah, they've really been pumping them out.
I like the pace, but there's like 3 or 4 different ones a month. I think we now have 2 Justice Societies from the Golden Age, and I think we have 2 Silver Age Green Lanterns. And if we don't right now, that like they're coming in the next month or so. But is it going to be that like Green Lantern always comes out in April and Justice Society always comes out in May? How am I planning? Except when you send me the solicitations 2 months in advance and like I've got to figure out how I'm going to budget my comic budget.
Well, I think that might answer what we posed at the beginning of this, right? This desire for greater transparency. It might not be reasonable for them to release what their sales figure targets are to us, but yeah, even if it is quote unquote just this release schedule, so you have some sense, so you can plan, like you said, but also I think one of the things that's really hard from the fan perspective is you don't always know a line has been abandoned until you realize, oh man,
Yeah.
it's been quite a while. But if you know, okay, I don't know, in the fall, we're going to get a Superman in the Golden Age omnibus, and in the spring, we're going to get a Superman in the Silver Age omnibus. And that's kind of the schedule we're going to keep. Okay, fine. Then if a year goes by or a season goes by and you haven't gotten it, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? But yeah, for a variety of reasons, I would love that. Absolutely. All right. So like I said, we got a bunch of submissions from our audience members here. So this first category is what I'm referring to as kind of like special topics. I got one person, requested this. I'm going to run through them. And then if there's anything that really jumps out at you, that you want to share your thoughts on, have at it. Mike says a Superman Secret Identity by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen Absolute Edition. Patrick says maybe a collected edition of Superman Strength to get that back in the public consciousness, which is a great pick because I'm aware of it, but I've never read it and it's not available anywhere. Kal-El, real name, he says, I'd personally love collected editions of creators, but I would actually love some artist editions over writers for a change, which is a cool idea. Brett says, I want to see a Legion of Superheroes in the 31st Century, the tie-in to the animated series, completely collected. It was 20 issues in one volume. Yeah.
Those single issues are expensive.
Yeah.
For being all ages comics, I can't afford all of them.
Yeah. So that would be, that's another one that, that all ages material. And since we're getting the Superman Adventures Compendium, yeah, that would be great to have as well. Brian's number one most wanted is Absolute Superman Birthright. And he says, I honestly have the vision of a nice absolute titled Absolute Superman Post-Crisis Origins. The slipcase would have 3 hardcovers, Man of Steel, Birthright, and Secret Origin. Perry similarly says he wants a Superman Origins omnibus, collecting all the different versions of Superman's origin. So not dissimilar from what we're saying about like these kind of curated things.
That was on my list, and it just I prioritized other things.
Perry also wants a death metal omnibus where the issues are arranged in reading order so the damn thing actually makes sense. Perry, it doesn't matter what order you read that in. Trust me. Jumping back to Brian, he also wants a complete collection of Superman Earth 1. Because remember, there was the trilogy of original graphic novels.
Yeah.
And they did, but for Batman and Wonder Woman, they did the complete collection, which collected the 3 original graphic novels in one volume. Never did it for Superman. That didn't make it onto my list, obviously, but I agree with that.
It should be available. I wouldn't buy it, but it should be available.
Yeah. Henry had a few, including one of the things that you had hit on. The new Elseworlds collections were welcome additions, so I'd like to see more of those. Jeremy Harris, the Superboy comics based on the TV show to finally be collected. That ran about 20 issues. I bought them on eBay. Yeah, put that in a trade.
I have a signed copy from Gilbert Gottfried. He wrote issue 20.
He sure did. Oh, very cool. And then Brian McDonald, a deluxe edition, an updated edition of Superman versus the Flash, collecting all the races.
Good pick.
So those were kind of the special topics. And then we had a half a dozen folks who singled out Bronze Age. So Logan, we already mentioned, he was the one who wants an omnibus of the pre-crisis Mr. and Mrs. Superman stories, which, you co-signed on that.
That's the one I saw.
Yeah. Brett says, I want to see a complete omnibus for DC Comics Presents. Well, that would be cool. Man of Steven wants the Earth War saga. Nat called out Bronze Age generally, including DC Comics Presents and collections focusing on the works of Elliot S. Maggin and Jerry Conway. Garrett, again, big picture, the Bronze Age has always been a glaring omission. I think DC is trying to rectify that with DC Finest. Yeah, it seems that way. We'll see where it goes. And then Martin, I love this suggestion. He said, to follow the wonderful DC Finest Kryptonite Nevermore, collect Martin Pasco's superb 70s Superman run and call it Kryptonite Evermore. So to have kind of a companion to that. And he says, let's have complementary collections focusing on our other Bronze Age star writers like Elliot S. Maggin and Carrie Bates. And he also wants DC Finest containing all the private life of Clark Kent stories and throw in the sporting life of Steve Lombard, which I've never read any of those, but it sounds great. I'm on board.
I'm on board with all of that.
Yeah. So a lot of love for the Bronze Age here, which is, interesting, not totally surprising, but I was curious what people would come up with. We had 3 folks who want some version of New 52 Omnis. So Joseph, Perry, and Brian all called that out, which I would not be opposed to that. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, basically all of those new 52 series ran 52 issues. So it's like you could do each one in a single omnibus, which you think that would be the better way to do it by title as opposed to trying to, right? I think that would be more appropriate than trying to do like chronological, right? Yeah, you do it by title.
Some of that did not line up.
Yeah.
I do not want Grant Morrison's run on action to be sullied by whatever nonsense was happening in the main Superman title.
Yeah. Then 5 Million and Brett both want new Krypton Omnis, which, as you guys heard, made it onto my list. Jeremy Harris wants a Smallville season 11 omnibus. Fair enough.
I love Smallville season 11. I was so sorry that you didn't like it as much as I hoped that you would.
I know. I'll probably come back. I'll probably give it another shot at some point. Maybe I'll feel differently. And then Lorenzo said, DC did an awesome job collecting Smallville season 11 into trades, but they only ever released one volume of the Smallville tie-in comics published during the earlier seasons of the show. I want to see the rest of those issues collected as trades as well.
Good pick.
All right. And then we move into the Byrne Triangle era category here. So I'll kind of run through these because these largely speak to the same idea. Poor Rick Reason. He says, evidently Man of Steel Volume 4 needs to go back to reprint. Can't find it anywhere. He's been posting about it. He's really been having a hard time finding that volume. So there's that. Jeremy Harris wants a Superman John Byrne omnibus. So yeah, I guess whether they reprint that Volume 4 hardcover or an Omni, that's certainly material you would expect to have. Oh, you know, what's crazy to me that is not collected? The World of miniseries that John Byrne did.
Yes.
Those three.
Yes, that was going to be on my list too.
World of Krypton, World of Smallville, World of Metropolis. The fact that didn't make it into those Man of Steel hardcovers, crazy to me.
And they didn't make it into those like 9 trade paperbacks?
I have to double check, but I'm almost positive they did not.
Yeah, I can't imagine they would have if they didn't make it into the hardcovers. But yeah. I never finished making my way through those 9 paperbacks.
No. Yeah, but it's baffling to me. So I'm not opposed to a Byrne omnibus, but separate from that, I would want to see those 3 miniseries collect. They are on the app, credit where credit's due. But Gabe says, I would love to see the Triangle era collected in the DC Finest format, since the Omnis are too unwieldy to read. I'm going to respectfully disagree here, only in the sense that we're starting to get the Omnis. Let's commit to that. Let's get behind that. Yes. Let's get all of them. I don't want to switch formats at this point.
No, we're too far in.
Yeah. Both David and Jan want a Road to the Triangle era omnibus, which we are all for. Mike Rhodes, finish the Triangle era to at least 0 hour. Finish the Superman Blue run. Oh, I mean, that's another that speaks to you. And that's another abandoned line. They started collecting the Electric Saga. They did what, 1 volume?
They did 1 volume.
And then that was it.
You know, when they did that 1 volume, I said, well, we won't get a volume 2 of this.
As you sit there in your Electric Superman hoodie.
Yeah, I'm not going to get rid of my issues just yet. And actually, we'll never. Even if they gave me the full omnibus treatment, if they gave me an absolute Superman Blue, I would still hold on to my original issues.
Oh, right on. Well, I know that means a lot to you. Well, speaking of, Isaiah says, in a perfect world, there'd be an omnibus of the entire Electric Blue era. I mean, if these Triangle era Omnis continue, you should more or less get your wish.
And then people will have a way to read the Superman Blue, Superman Red one-shot, which is not on the app.
Exactly. I know that app, they really have a hard time with those one-shots.
Yes.
You know, the Y2K one-shot, not there. Unless you go to the City of Tomorrow trade. Yeah, they really, oh, God damn it.
I wonder if it's like a filing system thing where like they'd have to list it as Superman Y2K and they don't want to create a new entry and they can't feel like they could just put it in with Superman. Or I wonder if it's just that petty.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. Brian says, I hope we get a comprehensive reprint of the post-return storylines of the 90s. I love that whole run from 95 to 99 until Millennium Giants fell flat. Look, I'm no defender of Millennium Giants, but get that collected. I want all the way through the Triangle era. I mean, actually, if they stopped when Jurgens leaves, if they stop before the Loeb Kelly era, as long as, you know, we're getting the Loeb Kelly era collected in a different format, I'm okay with that. I'm okay.
I am too. Yeah, but you better put that Challengers of the Unknown Millennium Giants in that omnibus.
Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, they had the triangle numbers. They had halves.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I got you.
Aquaman, Supergirl, Steel. I want them all.
Yeah. Although even when we covered it on the show, I think I just skimmed through. I couldn't do it. It was hard enough going through the main issues.
I don't blame you.
Perry says, finish the Triangle Era collections. He also wants Steel collections of not only the 90s series, but also the issues of Man of Steel, where he played a big role. Which that's actually, for my whole my idea of the Steel compendiums, that's not a bad idea. You take some of those Schultz Man of Steel issues and that could be part of it. Yeah, that would be cool. And wants more Superboy collections from the 90s. Henry also wants more of the 90s Superboy series. And Jeremy Harris also wants more collections of the Superboy series from the 90s. Okay, last category here of Loeb, Kelly, and beyond here. So a lot are kind of speaking to the same thing. So maybe I'll try to single out the ones that are a little bit more distinct. So Perry wants a new Ending Battle collection that includes Action 775. Or maybe a Superman versus Manchester Black collection that collects all the Manchester stuff.
Ooh,
yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah. You do 775, you do Ending Battle, you do Justice League Elite. That would be cool.
That's a nice thick one. I mean, you might have too much for one volume there.
I mean,
Ending Battle is 8 or 6.
Yeah. And so Ending Battle is 8. And then Justice League Elite is 12. So that's 20. Plus you need JLA 100. So that's 21. And it's Action 775. Yeah, I mean, so that's doable.
Isn't Manchester Black in the Rebirth era at some point? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, that's yes. Well, he does. Yeah, he does come back and was most recently in Action 1050.
Right.
Maybe his last appearance, but he was also the Superman Authority miniseries. I mean, it depends how comprehensive you want to get with this, but I do like that idea. I know, especially when we covered the Action 775, I did hear from a few people. It's like kind of baffling. It's not collected in a lot of places, and and especially something like Ending Battle, like that would have felt like a very natural place to put it. Chase says, I wish they had continued with the City of Tomorrow trades, and you and me both. Jared, The Adventures of Superman run by Greg Rucka. Of course, we're big fans of that. Brett wants a new printing of Godfall. V. Ken Marion is listening to this and he's being like, yes, I want that. He loves that story. And I agree.
I like even more that story that I think either was right before or right after with Mr. Majestic from the Wildstorm universe. I love that. It was a 3-part arc around Godfall. Get that back. They had the Majestic miniseries of 4 issues, put that in with the 3 issues from the Superman titles. You got a nice Majestic Superman team up trade right there.
Yeah, that would be cool. Mike Rhodes says, finish collecting the Loeb Kelly run. I don't care what format, just pick a lane and finish it. Rob wants the Rucka, Austin, and other lines from the post Loeb Kelly runs. He was the one who suggested A Road to Infinite Crisis or something along those lines. Jan wants Joe Kelly's full run collected. Brian McDonnell similarly wants a Superman by Joe Kelly Omni. And then finally, Matthew here had a more specific mapping in mind. He said, I think over time we'll get an omnibus line that goes to the end of the Triangle era with Our Worlds at War. Whether that's as the event omnis we're seeing now or as volume 11 or 12 of a Triangle line. What I really hope for, however, is that the aftermath of that event and the end of the Kelly era is collected in a similar manner. My wish would be to have 2 omnis to cover that era. One called Ending Battle, which picks up with Superman finding Martha and starting to wear the new S-Shield, and ending with Ending Battle and the yellow S-Shield's return, and the return of Steel, as well as the reconciliation with Lois around her father's death, marking the end of the Our Worlds at War aftermath. The second one would deal with the Future Smiths and Godfall era, which marks the end of the Kelly era and really leads nicely into the Superman-Batman omnibus by Loeb and McGinnis. I do kind of like that mapping. Yeah, I do like that. And that's very nice, the idea of starting with the change in the S-Shield to the red and black, and then ending that omnibus with the return to yellow, and then getting into the whole Godfall period of time. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I'm on board. I'd buy that. If only to vote with my wallet for more material like it.
Well, I thank you so much for this, man. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I've been wanting to do this for a while. The idea popped into my head and I was like, I couldn't shake it. I was like, we got to do this. It'll be fun. And hopefully we get a good response. And I would just say to the audience, I mean, certainly to those who submitted, thank you very much. And to everyone else, I mean, chime in, let us know what you want, share pictures of your collection. If on the off chance someone from DC listens, we love these characters. We love these stories. And again, there's a lot of great stuff that's been going on, and we just want to see that continue. And we hope that if any of the items on any of our wish lists, make it to print, that would be a cool thing. Cause I think there's some good opportunities to take advantage of from the DC perspective. And I hope they do.
Yes, exactly. They're going to be riding a wave of public interest in the wake of this movie that I think that they look like they're trying to be prepared for. They seem like they're more prepared for it than they have ever been in the past. But I'm just too stung from all the previous movies and initiatives, and then like they do nothing for the comics. I think they're a little better positioned, and I just hope that I'm right about that. But as I've said several times tonight, I've been wrong about everything I've ever said, and I hope this is the exception.
Really, thank you again for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
This was the most fun one that I've been a part of. I don't know if it's the most fun episode that you've ever done. I don't think that's true because you've had Mark Waid twice, but it's the most fun one I've ever done.
Right on. This was a blast. Audience, thank you as always for tuning in. Make sure you come back next week. We're going to be talking all about crypto. That's going to be another really fun one. So make sure you come back for that. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, advanced listens, and more by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now covering the color era of the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today.